there's no time in any of this. And any of us NDEers will say that to you. We just, time and space and language just lose their understanding from this point forward. But I do my best. I don't know how long I was out of the SUV, seeming to hover, watching the body. I just recognized that at some point it stopped moving. It didn't look like it was uncomfortable anymore. And then the cracking and the popping sensations and that vibration pull became really intense again. And all of a sudden, I felt this pressure. And again, like this upward pulling, if you will, and I was no longer there. Not a body, just an energy that just seemed to have catapulted to this void of darkness.
Welcome to our podcast, What's Death Got to Do with It, here on the Near Death Network. We talk to experiencers, people who have been clinically dead, transitioned, come back, recount their experiences, because most of us won't have these experiences. What can they offer us? What type of insights going forward can help us out? We also talk to clinicians, academicians. This is a field now that is really being examined closely. So we want to lend a lot more voices to it and help you all live a more joyous and navigable life. For those of you out there right now, we do want to give you a little bit of time to perhaps take your children away from the camera, because we're going to be talking about a sensitive topic here today in suicide, and we don't want anyone to be alarmed or overwhelmed. And so if you have an opportunity and there are young ones around the camera, you have an opportunity now to get them in a position where they are not around the content of this podcast. I'd like to bring in now, if you've watched our channel real quickly and seen our expert panel, Kelly Sammy, who's joining me now, was instrumental in putting this panel together. And we're very close and we have a great relationship. And she does a lot of great things. And she's coming out of a 40-day plus fast. So we really appreciate you joining us, Kelly, because I know that in and of itself, to me, is overwhelming. I don't know that I could do a couple of days, but how are you doing?
I'm upright, so that's always a good thing. You get cozy, Kelly, today. I was telling Mark, you're getting cozy, Kelly, today, but I am very much here and very excited to be with this audience. So thank you, Mark.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us, and I appreciate your insights and your ability to convey them in a way that practically will help people move forward. But let's start at the beginning. You talked a lot about how you grew up and how the victimhood perception of life really dominated your existence for so long. If you could just set that up, and I know you probably have told this story a million times, but for those people who have not heard the chronology of what happened to you, if you could enlighten us, that would be great.
Absolutely. So, as Mark mentioned, I was raised by a predominantly Catholic upbringing and family. And so we did all of the things Catholicism, and that was just part of our familyhood. It was a very normal part of our process. My father was in the Navy. And so that's what I grew up with, a lot of structure, a lot of familial structure, as well as religious structure. And from a very young age, I was around and exposed to many things that started quite young. I didn't realize they weren't normal in a family. I didn't realize that everyone didn't have two alcoholic parents, for example. I didn't realize that um um kind of domestic violence wasn't normal. I didn't realize that having some creepy engagements with, your maternal grandfather wasn't normal. I didn't know this. And I think that I grew up with just this understanding of this is the way life is. So from a very young age, I started with what I call a victim mentality. Instead of anyone helping me through it and seeing what I was navigating in my home life, I just took on that I'm the victim of this, and I felt like everything was always happening to me. And that propelled and carried forward into my adult life. which I carried that victimhood forward. And I want to clarify when I use that word because I know it can be a triggering word for people. When you say you're a victim, people get very, defensive about that. But I honor that part of myself now and say we all have a victim story. Doesn't mean we are a victim. It just means the story is playing out. And so that's how I kind of perceive life. Everything that came at me, I already assumed I was going to be the victim of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So into my adulthood, I carried that chaos forward, attracted partners that helped lend to that same storyline, just as we do. We loop in the stories and the storylines, but I had no spiritual knowledge or understanding. I believed in a God and I believed in something would be able to help me through this. I then ended up going through a very, very tumultuous divorce when my son was very young. And during that divorce, my ex husband and I made a decision that it would be great for me to move to his home country to be a single mom. He felt it would be a safer place for me to raise our son, and I agreed. He was originally from New Zealand. I was very familiar with New Zealand. And so it made sense, and the agreement started the plans for me and my young son to move there. By the time we made that move after this tumultuous divorce, I had gone through a horrific hysterectomy on top of all of this. I lost a child and found out I would not have any more children. And so all of this was compounding into that victim story. It just all came with me with that move to New Zealand. And things went fairly well initially. I adapted in New Zealand really well with our son, and I found my way, my people, and just started to acclimate to that new life. And for the first time in a long time, I really did feel happy, genuinely happy. I'd met another American there. We were at Habitat for Humanity. We were both volunteering, and people kept telling us there's another American here. And we ended up falling in love, blending our families, and it was a really good couple of years. And slowly, all of the stuff that I hadn't healed in the grief from my divorce and the hysterectomy started to catch up. Hormone stuff was catching up. I was now in full blown hormonal midlife crisis chemically, and all that stuff was compounding. And I started to get very depressed. Long story short, the doctors tried to help me. They were giving me medications, and I did not know at the time that I was very, very sensitive to these types of meds. So I was taking them and I was doing regular visits and explaining to them that now not only was I depressed, but I was experiencing what I knew very well to be suicidal ideation. And I kept going in and explaining this, and they kept updating and changing the meds. And this went on for weeks. They added anti anxiety, sleeping aids, antidepressants. And after several weeks of feeling worse and worse and worse, I just stopped taking them and I started saving them in a jar. The suicidal ideation at this point was so intense that I began planning. I started writing suicide notes and really having this storyline of this really taking place. I called it Plan D. Plan D for me was something that rang through my victim life that if this didn't work out, whatever this was, I always had the out of Plan D, which was suicide. Not a normal thing to go through life with, yet another thing I didn't realize other people didn't experience. So Plan D went into effect. Didn't tell anyone I'd stopped taking the meds, kept going to the doctors, kept explaining to them I felt worse. And eventually, I woke up one day, no real understanding why that was the day, but my mind says today's the day we die. And I got up that day. It was beautiful out. My diseased mind was so convoluted at that point that it truly believed that I should get the whole family together and take photographs, which is
Hmm.
insane now to look at. But in my storyline, I thought, this is the day they're going to remember our family was happy. Let's make it happy. And just really unnormal unnatural thoughts, which tells you how diseased my mind was at that stage.
And this is in 2008.
2008. So I had had some doctor's appointments. We lived on a small island in the middle of New Zealand that you had to ferry boat to. And I had told my partner that he needed to be with the kids that day because I needed to go to this appointment and I needed to take the ferry over. And he knew that meant that it was an all day affair, and that was fine. So I got my things in order. We did the photos. They went off for their day. I went off for mine. I got in my SUV with my favorite pillow, a stack of suicide notes, and my bottle of pills. Again, so not normal. And I took off and I didn't know where I was going to go. I had the notes that I had been saving. I had the pills. I knew I needed to get some alcohol to mix it. That was my plan. So off to the alcohol store I went. I wasn't a drinker, I wasn't a drug user, so I didn't know what to get. And I just went in and said, "Do you have something pre-mixed?" And he gave me the pre-mixed section and I grabbed gin and tonics. Don't know why. At the time I didn't. I now realize it was my father's favorite alcoholic drink. And
Interesting.
I took that and I went. I got in the SUV and I started to drive around this tiny island we lived on. And I wanted to find a beautiful spot. Again, a diseased mind thinking I needed to be somewhere beautiful to die. And I started to drive up the mountaintops on this small island, this remote island we lived on, because everything had a bluff overlooking the ocean, regardless of where you were. So I figured if I went up there, I would find something that made sense. And that's what happened. I started driving around and I found this beautiful little area that you could tell they had just chopped a bunch of trees down and they were getting ready to build there, but it overlooked the ocean and all the wineries down below. And I pulled up on that bluff. And from there, I sat in the front seat and I had one more note, or one, or, a few more little notes to write. And one of them was to the EMTs that would find my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really strongly about this. I had thought on the drive there, oh my gosh, you've got to apologize to whoever is going to find you. And once I finished that last note and I took my time, I was slowly taking the pills and the alcohol. And not being a drug or alcohol user, I felt it pretty quickly.
Mm.
And I thought, you should probably get out of the car and maybe have a little restroom break. So I opened the door, and I'd say it was probably about a half an hour after I had started taking the pills, and they were pretty much gone at this point. When I opened the car door and I went to step out, my legs were like noodles already, and I realized it's too far. It's too far gone here. So I closed the door, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to stand up. I climbed into the back of the SUV, put all the suicide notes on the dashboard, and I laid down with my blanket and pillow. And I just started saying to God, I know you're merciful. I know you're loving. I know this is a sin, but I know that you'll make sure I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Something to those lines. I just kept saying it over and over like a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this like ironic thought. How will you know when you're dead? And I still laugh when I say that because to me it's I mean, have you ever thought about that?
Oh yeah, I think that's a normal thought to have. So what does that separation feel like?
Right.
And how am I going to be cognizant of it?
Right. And so I'm laying there thinking, well, how will you know when you're dead? And I heard from that internal dialogue we all have that we don't realize what it is. Just watch the breath. I heard just watch the breath. I was like, okay. So I just started following the breath, and I did not know that was a form of meditation. So as I'm calming myself down with God is loving, God is gracious, all will be forgiven, I'm also saying, are you still breathing? I'd check in and then I'd go back to the mantra and then I'd go back to the breathing. And as I was doing this back and forth for I don't know how long, not long at all, I started noticing what I would refer to as like cracking and popping sounds. And Mark, what was weird about it was when I say sounds, you probably perceive hearing like popcorn in the other room, right? Like you perceive a sound away from you. But what was different was I wasn't hearing a sound away from me. I was the sound.
Hmm.
I was the popping. I was the crackling. And that became really interesting to me. And I became curious. And I thought, oh, the alcohol's kicked in, right? Or the drugs have kicked in. And so then I was like, but it's really weird. Then it started getting louder and louder and more intense, and I was it. So now I wasn't just hearing the popping and crackling, I was experiencing I was that, but I was feeling the sensation of being popping and crackling. So now I'm like, wow, this is, I don't know what was in this pill jar, but wow. And
Do you think that was the
then
release of your soul?
no, no, not yet. It was just
Okay.
this buildup and this vibrational like pulsation going through my body. And as I was paying more attention to that and still checking in for the breath, all of a sudden I heard this loud popping sound and then this pulling sensation, and that was the leaving of the body. And it
Mm,
was like I was above the SUV, but my SUV didn't have a moonroof or anything, but I was looking down at my body in
mm.
there, and it was wiggling and it was moving and it looked really uncomfortable, but I wasn't experiencing any of that. I didn't have the sensations of it. I didn't have any of the feelings of discomfort. I didn't even have what I would call like a regret or a sorrow for it. It was
Yeah.
more just curious, you know?
So you just look at the body, like so many folks have told us, it's almost like the shell, it's the container, it's the skin suit. You know, you are not the body at that time. Obviously, you've separated from it. But oddly to me, the metaphor that you set up for this ritual that you created was almost a celebratory ritual from your perspective, and you, I think you articulated very well that that just shows you what ideation will do. You feel like, okay, yeah, this is going to finally release me and everybody's going to be fine, and you don't understand the gravity of what's going on, but continue with the story. So then what happens next when you're above and looking down?
So I'm above and I'm looking down, and there's something rational in this separation. And I want to expand on that. When I say rational, we use thoughts, and the mind interprets those, and we assume those are the correct things. But for whatever reason in this experience, something in that, I call it that, the version of Kelly that was now not in a body, soul, if you'd like, knew that rationally those thoughts weren't believable anymore. It was just like I wasn't leaning towards any thought about anything. So I didn't have, shame or blame or guilt or regret. I wasn't thinking you need to get back to your family. I wasn't even concerned about the physical body at all. And I didn't have any thoughts like I need to go somewhere or I need to get something done. It was just an acceptance of this moment being completely unique and yet familiar at the same time. It's the only way I can explain it. Like something in me knew this was normal, and something also felt like I was completely safe.
So there was no panic at all.
None. None at all. Nor any expectation of going somewhere or getting anything done. Nothing. And I don't, there's no time in any of this. And any of us NDEers will say that to you. We just, time and space and language just lose their understanding from this point forward. But I do my best. I don't know how long I was out of the SUV, seeming to hover, watching the body. I just recognized that at some point it stopped moving. It didn't look like it was uncomfortable anymore. And then the cracking and the popping sensations and that vibration pull became really intense again. And all of a sudden, I felt this pressure. And again, like this upward pulling, if you will, and I was no longer there. Not a body, just an energy that just seemed to have catapulted to this void of darkness. And darkness can sound scary, but it was the most loving feeling I have ever felt. It
Yeah,
was
I
just
heard you say real quickly because I think this gives it perspective, and I know you love your son beyond measure. But and those of us who have children can relate to this. But you said it was 10 million times stronger than the love of your son, which is extraordinary. So to give that type of an example shows just how enveloped you were by love.
not just my son, but the first time I looked into my son's eyes, and we all know that's a magical moment you can't recreate. We love our children, but something about that first moment you're holding them and you look in their eyes and you connect, it was that feeling times
Wow.
10 million. And I'm in this dark void, but there wasn't a me. I wasn't a presence. I wasn't a separate thing. I wasn't a Kelly or a body or even a soul. There were no thoughts. It was just everything was love, and I was that. And I don't know how long again I stayed there. Again, time and space are complete illusions, but I would have stayed there forever. Obviously, I wasn't intended to, because the popping and the crackling sensation began again, the sensation of this pulling energy. But now the pulling became almost like, I describe it like being a sardine in a sardine can, and you're finally getting that top rolled open, and the sardines are able to break out of the can. And that's what it felt like the soul was doing, even though I wasn't a body, was just this expansion that could not stretch out enough, and I became everything. And in that unfolding, I was being pulled again with the popping and the crackling, and now this beautiful pink. I cannot explain. I've tried to recreate it as a painter. I've tried to re-see it in my meditations. It's a color we just simply do not have. But imagine the most beautiful pale pink you could ever see, and billowy and safe and sacred, like this blanket, just so cozy. I was it. I was just that. And then came the smells. I liken them to the most beautiful fragrant gardenias you've ever smelled,
Hmm.
standing in the middle of a gardenia flower bed. And then these choirs of beautiful angelic music that just permeate every bit of who I was, because again, I wasn't hearing this, I was it. I was the sound, the smell, the feelings, all of it, so intently. And again, it felt so familiar, so normal, and there was nothing trying to get away from it or make something happen in that. Just joy.
Wow, it's really magnificent, and then when you go to the next step, which is to show that all of this is totally synchronized perfectly. The gentleman who's reviewing the site of the construction site, who had not anticipated going there, is all part of the play, right? Because we're all players in the play. So his part was to discover the body. Then you're airlifted, to the hospital. Then you get into the hospital, and so we go there, and I think it's really poignant how you had a couple of interactions there. The one with the gal after you interacted with the medical staff, which I think is "I see you," which is one of your favorite sayings is "I see you." Right? Can you describe then what happens when you're in ER? You've been airlifted there.
Yeah, so I'm airlifted because we're on this tiny island. The only way they can take care of me is to airlift me. And I just want to tell everyone how beautiful everything is, how loving this is. And they're all thinking I've damaged my brain because I've just tried to kill myself. And I'm in this observation room in the ER, and they have me right near the nurse's station, obviously keeping a very close eye on me. But they've pulled the curtains semi closed enough I can see out, they can see in, and I'm laying in the cot, still vibrating like crazy, and at this point thinking I damaged my brain, because if I even looked at the ceiling in the ER, I went into it, I became it. I would spiral, I
Wow.
would become atoms, molecules, and I was out of my body again. And I was thinking, you've really damaged your brain, Kelly. So as I'm laying there kind of experimenting with all these new toys and whistles that I think are temporary, from the meds, um, I hear a man come in with a wheelchair with a woman, and she's all wiggly in the chair. You can tell she's on something, something's not right with her. And he's having a very deep conversation with the nursing staff and kind of not paying attention to her. And she's kind of slouched down in her wheelchair. And we make eye contact, and no one's paying attention to either one of us because they're in that discussion, but she somehow gets out of the wheelchair and just as straight as can be walks right over to me, leans on the cot and kind of looks into my eyes, and she says, "I see you." And in that moment they recognize she's on the cot, and they come and they grab her and shove her back in the wheelchair, and off she goes again. And I just got really shaky, like that felt familiar. That's a message. I'm supposed to remember something. And I started tying it back to what had happened to me in my out of body near death, which was, you're not alone. There's going to be angelic guidance here back in the body, and we'll keep reminding you that we see you. And that
So it's
was
kind
my
of a
first.
validation for you for your experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had several of those ICU encounters just in the hospital for that 24-hour period they kept me. Yeah.
Wow. And I know you talk about the fact that they're thinking, even the doctors thinking, you can tell, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, she's lost it. She's rambling about these different levels of consciousness and going into the ceiling and seeing a woman who had been catatonic for a while, and all of a sudden she's conversing with her. You're classical, presenting the classical symptoms of somebody who's got maybe something not altogether up there. However, from your purview, you have tremendous clarity that you've never really achieved before until this act. So is that kind of the payoff? And then also talk about the life review, because I think your take on the life review is very unique, and I think it really articulates the compelling nature of how that is presented to us. It's not a punitive thing, right? So many
No.
people think it's like a punitive thing. Oh, you were a real prick to that kid in second grade, and then he became a drug addict, and
Right.
it's part your fault, and you should never do that again. It's not presented that way in your story.
Not at all. In fact, it was very loving. It was an encounter in this amazing, what I would almost call a mausoleum, or some kind of celebratory, marble space that we were in. And I was just having every experience that I'd ever encountered in my 38 years at that point flashing around me. And the good, the bad, the ugly, all of the victim stories were being shown to me, things I had done to others and they had done to me, but each one was greeted as a celebration. Like you said, Mark, it was like, you hurt that little girl when you were 5, and let's look at that. And then it was like, and that was the agreement you two had, and it was amazing, and you learned, and you both overcame and became stronger people from that encounter. And so each one was just a celebration. It wasn't, that was a sin, you need to repay for that, it's karma. It was none of that. It was just constant celebration and wins.
So
Yeah.
how would you describe then? I've heard so many people, I haven't heard you talk about it, but a pre-birth plan where we set, in the Hall of Records, however you want to characterize it, with our guides, and we say, okay, this is your outline, you've agreed to it, and I say yes, and then we sign off on it, and we come down here, the veil is wiped clean. But how do you reconcile the plan itself and then the autonomy to still be sovereign within that plan, and then go left or go right?
So I call it a soul plan. And I have a birth guide that was introduced to me the first time I'm sitting in that ER. And she says to me, she's sitting on the cot as real as Mark is to me right now. The doctor asks me, "Are you seeing or hearing anything that you shouldn't be?" Which I think is hysterical after you've just tried to kill yourself. And immediately she appears at the end of my cot, just like Mark is real to me right now. And she says, "You're going to have to trust us now. If you tell them you see us, they'll lock you up." And that was the first time I had to trust this. I didn't know at the time was my birth guide, Bernadette. So I immediately said, I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, everything's good. Um, but Bernadette became my advocate to help me understand my birth plan and to help me start to understand that everything that had happened to me that I had called a victim experience was actually preparing me for where I was right now, including my suicide. That we do help to script that, and that our identification with what we refer to as free will be completely unraveled once we understand that not only is time and space an illusion, but that our experience is a separate body, and ever being separate from the soul or the oneness of it all is just not true. We are atoms and molecules that vibrate together. And on some level and some rhythm, I think everyone can comprehend, even scientifically, that those atoms and molecules eventually come together. That's what we refer to as oneness. That's what I experienced in the void. So to think that I'm having separate encounters or soul plans with people, it encourages an egoic structure which says, I am Kelly, I am female, I am a mother, I do this job, I go here. And we get into what I call sheepland or the dreamscape, and we just start doing the things. And for me, after this experience, I couldn't do that again because I had seen through the illusion of that being true. But bigger than that, I had seen through the illusion that I was a separate body. Didn't believe in that. And so I call myself the story of Kelly now because I perceive myself as a cartoon character that's in a play, and I'm the one watching it. I am actually the eyes seeing it. So to need a plan has fallen away now. The idea of a plan has fallen away. I now recognize that my sovereignty comes in being in complete surrender because this is all mapped out for me.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with duality, right? And that's a whole show in and of itself. So when we're on
Yes.
this sphere of influence, we operate in duality, right? Wrong, up, down, right, left. However, in the other space that we are home in, we're the all of all at all times. So we have that kind of autonomy, and we just accept it as our birthright because we haven't seen the separate physicalness of the 3D existence. But that gets a little bit esoteric to the degree that we get down into the minutia. But I think a couple of things are important for us to cover before we stop. First of all, so many people in this life now, Kelly, and you know this, and we talked about this initially. There's so much vitriol in the world, and so many people are despondent, and so many people don't have hope, and they don't really believe that they can effectuate a plan where they can see themselves in 5 years or 10 years. And you went through all of that and you acted it out. And I know this is, you don't want to get into total specifics because it's unique to the character of the individual, but holistically, what would you say from what you went through that could offer up a primer for somebody like that who's so despondent right now?
That there is an internal dialogue within each of us, constantly being our GPS. It's our true north. Most of us don't tap into that. We call it intuition. Some of us say, I'm not an intuitive person, and other people say, I'm very intuitive. We are all intuitive creatures. And tapping into that is it's as simple as trusting your internal guidance. So for example, we've all had the experience of being in a car and not knowing why we know, but something feels unsafe, and trusting that and maybe pulling over and saying, oh, that tire was getting ready to blow. We've all had that at least once in this lifetime. What I say to people is, the more you tune into the realization that that's actually your true divine nature, and that everything that defies that is actually the opposite, and we lean in more to that, that intuition will expand by virtue of us just giving it our attention. And it's our connection to source, God, universe, love, whatever you call it. And I say it's like a doorbell. Every time you ring it, it gets clearer. Every time you ring your guides, your angels, your archangels, your ascended masters, that connection gets clearer because you're saying to awareness, which you're a part of, I trust you, even though I don't really understand you. You don't need to understand it. You just need to say, I trust it. And that's what faith is. So for me, what had to happen was hope had to die for faith to set in because hope says it could happen. And I don't live in could or should land anymore. I live in it already is here.
Well, what I like, and another great metaphor that you use is fractals, of essentially frequency. We're autonomous fractals, and we have the ability to integrate how we see fit. And what we choose is what we adopt, right? So if I watch bad newscasts all day long and I think, oh my God, I'm myopic and the world's going to hell and I better build a fortress and build a bunker. Well, then you're just gonna, it's like dominoes, they're just gonna fall. But if you can, at least we say, make each thought better than the last. And when in doubt, reboot. When you get off track, reboot and start over again. That's the beauty of consciousness. We are autonomous. We have that latitude. I can't make you do anything if you don't give away your power to me. So if I say, let's rob a bank, you say, no, I'm not in. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So we have that. I mean, that's kind of sophomoric as an example, but I think that's what you're saying. We have that ability to tune into that inherent spiritual gift that's unique to each one of us.
Yeah. And that true north or that inner GPS will never lie to us. So it's more about being aware of that, like you said, Mark. I mean, so many people right now are so lost in their own suffering stories because they won't step away from what I would deem the normal structures. And they won't even give themselves an hour of that. Or they'll go to church on Sunday and feel empowered by what they heard in the church. And then as soon as they leave, they're in the parking lot flipping the guy next to him from the pew two over because they're trying to get to Denny's before, they can't get a seat there. And we just get lost in the priority of the moment, and it's up to us to lean more towards what is going to open us up. And I just feel like the universe will always keep sending those invitations. It's up to us to open them.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing now, because you're offering these insights and from your own practice. Nurture Your Soul is your contact, and we'll put it in the liner notes and we'll give them your contact information later. But if I'm despondent or I'm going through travails in life, how could I reach out to you to get your counsel based on the experience that you've gone through and how it's honed your ability to, especially with others? I find this with myself. I'm great with others, but I don't necessarily employ a lot of the same things that I articulate to you, right? How,
Right.
what does your practice look like, and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So as you said, my business is called Nurture Your Soul. YouTube is my primary location. I got rid of my website, streamlining everything one place. I have over 500 free videos, audiobooks, everything on my channel is free, you guys. I've shared my full near death experience multiple times there. It's all there free for you guys to tap into. And that's really important to me because I have filmed these recordings over the years and I have shifted so much in this unraveling experience. It's not like one profound experience awakens you, it's a continual process of unraveling, and it will be until we leave the body. So you can tap into all those free resources, free audiobooks, free videos. If you want one on one counseling, my contact details are on my YouTube. And I do anything from psychic medium channeling one on ones, which I do charge for those. I'm very transparent about that. That's my life work. Um, and then I also do work in Advaita non duality, if that's something you're interested in seeing through the separate self, which we talked a little bit about. And I also do fasting and extended fasting. So my channel is very diverse, lots to find there. but that's how they can get in touch with me and any kind of work we can look at.
Well, and I'd like to leave each show, and you and I discussed this before we started putting the channel on. And like I said, I want to thank you because you were instrumental in helping me get out of my own way and start this channel, because I think we all come from the same place of service, right? Maybe through different directions. We may, but we all arrive at the same destination.
Yeah.
So if folks can take some of the characteristics from what you learned through the near death experience, because let's face it, a small portion of the world will experience this remarkable experience that you and others have gone through, but it's not all peaches and cream. You got to reintegrate, you got to get accustomed to, if you're in heaven, then all of a sudden you come back here, you're thinking, oh my God, why did I agree to this? How can people utilize some of those salient topics that you have got a fix on now in their own lives if they don't have a near death experience?
So when I found out I was going back to the body, um, I was literally escorted by Archangel Gabriel and the choir of angels. And the last thing that was imparted to me without words, it was telepathically known, that communication, that I was going back to the physical vessel. The last thing that they gave to me as a gift when I was leaving, um heaven, if you will, to go back to the physical vessel, was my only role here would be to breathe and not resist.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand the depth and the breadth of that empowered line, but it has been my true north. It was the first thing I had tattooed on my arm. Told Mark, I'm like, I don't know if I can show you guys, if I can get it off, but this became the backdrop of a whole sleeve from my near death experience. But it says, breathe and don't resist. And ultimately, now I understand what that means is, yes, we are sovereign beings. But if we fully surrender and we say, I don't understand this, just like I did when I was dying, I don't know what's going to happen to my body, but I believe God is a loving and gracious being. Remember, that's how I went into killing myself. I carried that back with me. If I am always believing that if I am at my lowest low and I surrender that to a power greater than myself, I will always be taken care of. And I have. Breathe and don't resist. If that's the only thing you can take away as a message from this today, I can surrender and breathe and not resist. And in 15 minutes, this ebb and this wave will calm back down, and I might have a clearer perspective to step forward and ask for help, or say I need some guidance, or I'm really in a bad place to somebody. So reach for that breathe and not resist moment.
So it helps you reestablish spiritual clarity then.
Yes. And it's saying, I don't trust myself as a sovereign being at this moment. I am giving that away. I am giving that autonomy to something bigger than I am, which I'm a part of, by the way, which is the most important piece. I don't see it as hierarchical. I don't see it that I'm giving it to a man with a gray beard in the sky. I'm surrendering to that which I am a part of, which I call source or God.
Well, and one final observation that you made that I think is huge. Talk about, um, we're kind of circling back to the life review about forgiveness, and if I offended you, and I want to make amends with you, but like you say, what is the quote? If there's not two, then there's nothing to forgive. Something to that degree. I thought that
Yeah.
was very profound.
Oneness, never two. What I was shown is there is oneness. There have never been two. So who is there to forgive? Again, scientifically, for anyone not watching this that is atheist or doesn't believe in a God, you don't have to. All you need to do is look at scientific evidence. At some stage, you and I are atoms and molecules that cohabitate. We are not these separate hard physical bodies. Science has absolutely proven that. So, how can there be two? There's only a problem when there's two. So that's where the work in non-duality and no seeing through the separate self comes in. I found for myself the equation of helping unravel this ego faster was to recognize there is no ego at all. That's the whole debunking that needs to happen.
Well, I think that's beautiful. And I think when people understand spiritual uniformity, and I think we're getting closer as a civilization. I'm always the optimist. Everybody looks at this and thinks the world's going to hell in a handbasket, but
Right.
it's almost like when you're a ironsmith and you're pounding out the horseshoe, you've got to mold and create the new real, which has always been real, right? We've been in the illusory part of reality. And now science, like you said, science is already corroborating the fact that we are not physical, we're energy in motion. You can't destroy energy. It morphs, it transforms, but your nucleus of your soul and your sovereign spirit will always be intact.
Absolutely. And it is endless and it is boundless and it is the purest version of love we've ever been able to know. It's so boundless and so unconditional. It even loves us when we're not unconditionally loving to ourselves. It still loves us then.
That's pretty remarkable because I know I go to that space on multiple times a day, but I think,
Yes.
like you said, it's all about the reset. Just reset. Know what your true north is, like you said. So, listen, we really appreciate the fact that you were able to visit with us, and congratulations on navigating all the way through your 40 plus day fast. You look fabulous. You look like your vibration is just humming along. And so I'll have your contact information in the liner notes, and you and I will talk very soon.
Thank you. And I really, really want everyone on the Nurture Your Soul community to support this channel. What Mark and his team are doing here is so different than any other channel, you guys. I really encourage you not just to watch this, share the channel, let others reach this content. It is going to hit them right where they need it to. And you saw this today for a reason. There's no coincidences in the universe. Thank you, Mark, for having me. Love you.
Thank you, Callie. You as well.